As a student at the University of Chicago, Bernie Sanders was active in both the Congress on Racial Equality and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. In 1962, he was arrested for protesting segregation in public schools in Chicago. The police came to call him an outside agitator as he went around putting up flyers around the city detailing police brutality. Sanders participated in the historic March on Washington in 1963 as a 22-year-old student at the University of Chicago. Quote, "It was a question for me of basic justice. The fact that large numbers of African Americans who couldn't vote, who couldn't eat in a restaurant, whose kids were going to segregated schools, who couldn't get hotel accommodations, and were living in segregated housing. That was clearly a major American injustice and something that had to be dealt with," unquote.
Wow, Cleveland in the house. Greetings, Cleveland, Ohio, and everyone who has come from every part of this great state. It is a tremendous sight to see so many of you here in the Woolstein Center at the Cleveland State University. We have come here tonight to feel the burn. When I say feel, you say burn. Feel. Feel. When I say feel, you say burn. Feel. Feel. All right now. We are at a critical moment in our nation's history. And the fact that Senator Bernie Sanders is answering the call to stand up for working class folks and middle class folks in this country to say enough is enough is enough is enough. The countless folks who are in the working poor who work 2 and 3 jobs at a time and they still can't make ends meet. Enough is enough is enough. People who are saddled by debt in this country, Senator Sanders says enough is enough is enough. Too many Americans in this country are being deprived of health care. The senator says enough is enough is enough. And for the women in this country who are being deprived of their right to control their own bodies, Senator Sanders says enough is enough is enough. And ladies, can I just say this? We want our whole damn dollar. Enough is enough is enough. Or what about a justice system that is unjust to African Americans and our Hispanic brothers and sisters? Enough is enough is enough. You will not be surprised to know that Senator Sanders has a racial justice plan that affirms the value of people of color and wants to do away with the 4 types of violence that is waged against them: physical, political, legal, and economic. Enough is enough is enough. Senator Sanders is running this race. Him and Mrs. Sanders, they are running this race. Senator has 4 children and 7 grandchildren, and he wants them to inherit a world where they can live their greatest greatness. He is running this race for your children and your children and your children and my children. Enough is enough is enough. Senator Sanders wants everybody to be able to live their measure of the American dream. He is sick and tired of an economy that is rigged. Enough is enough is enough. Now, I'm going to tell you something, folks. Senator Sanders can win this race. Don't listen to the pundits. He can, and he will win this race. He will win this race. Because when I think about Senator Sanders, I think about a public servant for our time. He has been doing the work of the people his entire political career. He has been steady in his commitment to folks who live in this country. He is going to get it done. Senator Sanders lives on his principles. He is going to get it done. So if all of us put a little extra on our ordinary, extraordinary things will begin to happen in this country. I know it and I believe it, which is why I am feeling the burn. Now, we need you all to do some very important things. Each and every person in this room, you are a part of making the political revolution real. And we have to get out here and make sure that we register people to vote, that we are out there voting in great numbers, and we make it known that Senator Bernie Sanders will be the next president of these United States of America. He is a man of principle. And I applaud the senator for taking this on. So I want to leave you with three things. Number one, I believe that the creator of this great universe has given us two hands, one to reach forward and one to reach back, lifting as we climb. That we can't ask other folks to do more for us than we are willing to do for ourselves. In the words of my grandmother, who was born in 1913, my grandmother could not read or write, but she could count her money. And she kept her money in the Southern Ladies Bank and Trust. When I asked my grandmother, what does it take to be successful in life? She said, my dear granddaughter, all you need are the three bones, the wishbone, the jawbone, and the backbone. She said the wishbone will keep you hoping and praying because hope is the motivator, but the dream is the driver. The reason why Senator Sanders is running this race is because he knows that the hopes and the dreams of everyday citizens are wrapped in his leadership to push this country forward for all folks. My grandmother said that the jawbone will give you courage to speak truth to power, or in the words of Dantes, the hottest places of hell are reserved for those who in times of great moral crisis choose neutrality. Sisters and brothers, we have a great moral crisis on our hands, and we cannot be neutral. We will not be neutral. Unless you have the supercalifragilisticexpialidocious bone, which is the backbone, because the backbone will keep us standing through all of our trials and our tribulations. And in this life, we will go through some stuff, but you cannot have a testimony without a test. We are being tested. So feeling the burn is like when you have a good workout and the burning sensation you feel is proof that you are getting stronger. That is what Senator Sanders is doing for our party, and that is what he is doing for this nation. He is making us stronger. He is making us stronger. And if you want a Democratic Party that is super fierce and ultra committed and brings justice and equality and brings us all together, young and seasoned, black, white, Hispanic, Native American, Asian, all of us together, we must work and get the vote out. We must feel the burn, Cleveland. Feel the burn, Ohio. Feel the burn, America. Feel the burn. And when I say feel, you say burn. Feel. Feel. When I say feel, you say burn. Feel. Feel. Burn. Without further ado, I bring you the man that is taking it to, who's shown up doing the thing, the Honorable Senator Bernie Sanders.
Don't tell me we can't provide a good healthcare system guaranteeing healthcare to all of our people. Don't tell me that we can't use technology to make sure that workers do not have to work 50 or 60 hours a week. Don't tell me that we can't have an excellent childcare system and a great educational system in this country. Don't tell me that this great country and our young people cannot lead the world in transforming our energy system so the planet we leave to our kids and our grandchildren is one that is habitable. Don't tell me we can't do that. We can do that. But what we have to do to move forward is to take on the incredible greed and power of a handful of billionaire families who want it all. Honest to God, I cannot explain to you why a family like the Koch brothers, who are worth $85 billion, you might think that that is enough money. You might think that they're not quite worrying about feeding their families or their summer vacation. And yet, they are spending huge amounts of money to destroy Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, public education, the Environmental Protection Agency. Now, why they are motivated to do that, I think a psychiatrist would have to examine. I don't understand. No, I really don't. No, I'm being very serious here. You know, we all have friends who have problems with alcohol, right? We have friends who have problems with drugs. But I think what you're looking at now is a certain number of very wealthy and powerful people who have a problem with greed and power. You know, and it's an addiction. They need more and more. But again, I don't know why you need billions more. Right? And we have got to stand united. And when we do that, there is nothing that we as a people cannot accomplish. It embarrasses me, to tell you about what these other countries are doing for their people, and we're not doing it. But in order to do that, we do need a political revolution. Let me just simply tell you what that means. It means that you can't have elections as we did last November where 63% of the people don't vote, where 80% of young people don't vote. What we have to do is change our culture so that people understand that politics in a democratic society and involvement in the political process is what patriotism is about. So when people tell you, oh, you know, politics is all crap, why are you coming here on a beautiful afternoon to hear some senator from a state no one ever heard of? You know, why are you coming here? And you tell them because you're concerned about the future of this country. You want to hear ideas. And anyone who tells you that politics is not important, you ask them why the Koch brothers are going to spend $1 billion on this election. So if it's important for people who want to destroy Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and federal aid to education, it is important for working families. So what I'm asking you to do is to help me make a political revolution in which we build a strong mass movement. I don't mind when wealthy people and the billionaires come out against me. I kind of expect that. But I do get upset in hearing working people voting for candidates who are going to send their jobs abroad, who are going to take their kids off of health insurance, who are going to make it harder to send their kids to college. I know that there are divisive issues. I know not everybody in this room is pro-choice. And there are probably divisions on guns, and there are divisions on gay marriage and all that stuff. I understand that. Fine, in a democratic society we can disagree. Trust me, my wife and I disagree. And I hear it all the time. All right. But on economic issues, let's reach out to our brothers and our sisters and our co-workers and our neighbors and say, no, don't vote against your kids and your parents. Don't vote for people who want to destroy Social Security and send your job abroad. If we do that, if we involve millions of people in this campaign, man, we can create a country the likes of which no one has ever seen. That's our mission, and I look forward to working with you to make that happen. Thank you very much.
What does your Jewish heritage mean to you, and how does it inform your policy positions, if at all?
Well, good question. I'm proud to be Jewish, not particularly religious. And what the lesson that I learned as a little kid is understanding in a very deep way what politics is about. A guy named Adolf Hitler won an election in 1932. He won an election. And 50 million people died as a result of that election in World War II, including 6 million Jews. So what I learned as a little kid is that politics is in fact very important. Thank you. President Falwell and David, thank you very much for inviting my wife Jane and me to be with you this morning. We appreciate the invitation very much. And let me start off by acknowledging what I think all of you already know. And that is the views that many here at Liberty University have, and I, on a number of important issues are very, very different. I believe in women's rights and the right of a woman to control her own body. I believe in gay rights and gay marriage. Those are my views, and it is no secret. But I came here today because I believe from the bottom of my heart that it is vitally important for those of us who hold different views to be able to engage in a civil discourse. Too often in our country, and I think both sides bear responsibility for us, there is too much shouting at each other. There is too much making fun of each other. Now, in my, and I say this as somebody whose voice is hoarse because I have given dozens of speeches in the last few months, it is easy to go out and talk to people who agree with you. I was in Greensboro, North Carolina just last night. All right. We had 9,000 people out. Mostly they agreed with me. And tonight, we're going to be in Manassas and have thousands out, and they agree with me. That's not hard to do. And that's what politicians, by and large, do. We go out and we talk to people who agree with us. But it is harder, but not less important, for us to try and communicate with those who do not agree with us on every issue. And it is important to see where, if possible, and I do believe it's possible, we can find common grounds. Now, Liberty University is a religious school, obviously. And all of you are proud of that. You are a school which, as all of us in our own way, tries to understand the meaning of morality. What does it mean to live a moral life? And you try to understand in this very complicated modern world that we live in what the words of the Bible mean in today's society. You are a school which tries to teach its students how to behave with decency and with honesty, and how you can best relate to your fellow human beings, and I applaud you for trying to achieve those goals. Let me take a moment, or a few moments, to tell you what motivates me in the work that I do as a public servant, as a senator from the state of Vermont. And let me tell you that it goes without saying, I am far from being a perfect human being, but I am motivated by a vision which exists in all of the great religions, in Christianity, in Judaism, in Islam, in Buddhism, and other religions. And that vision is so beautifully and clearly stated in Matthew 7:12. And it states, "So in everything do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets." That is the golden rule. Do unto others what you would have them do to you. That is the golden rule, and it is not very complicated. Let me be frank, as I said a moment ago. I understand that the issues of abortion and gay marriage are issues that you feel very strongly about. We disagree on those issues. I get that. But let me respectfully suggest that there are other issues out there that are of enormous consequence to our country and, in fact, to the entire world, that maybe, just maybe, we do not disagree on. And maybe, just maybe, we can try to work together to resolve them.
As far as race inequality is concerned, this question from one of our students. If you were, sir, were elected president, what would you do to bring healing and resolution to the issue of racism in our country? We both want to see that go away. What steps would you begin to take if you were our leader in seeing that resolved?
That is an excellent question. I thank you for it. I would hope and I believe that every person in this room today understands that it is unacceptable to judge people, to discriminate against people based on the color of their skin.
Yes.
And I would also say that as a nation, the truth is that a nation which in many ways was created, and I'm sorry to have to say this, from way back on racist principles, that's a fact, we have come a long way as a nation. Now I know My guess is that probably not everybody here is an admirer or a voter for Barack Obama. But the point is that in 2008, this country took a huge step forward, David, in voting for a candidate based on his ideas and not the color of his skin. And whether you like Obama or not, and I do, he is a friend of mine and I work with him on many issues, that is a step forward for America. But let me also say what everybody here knows, and my thoughts having just returned from South Carolina, we all know to what degree racism remains alive in this country. I cannot understand, I really can't, I think about it, I try to understand it, how a sick man can walk into a Bible study class, discuss the Bible, pray with people in the room, and then take out a gun and kill 9 of them because the color of their skins were different than his. And I cannot understand for the life of me how there can be hundreds of groups in this country whose sole reason for existence is to promote hatred. These are hate groups.
Right.
And they say, join us so we can hate African Americans or gays or Jews or immigrants or anybody that is different from us. I can't understand that. But let us be clear that when you have unarmed African Americans shot by police officers, something which has been going on for years, that is also institutional racism and cries out for reform. I am a former mayor who's worked closely with police officers. Vast majority of them are honest, work hard, and do a very good job. But when a police officer breaks the law, as is the case with any other public official, that officer must be held accountable. That's justice. And there is a lot to be done in terms of our criminal justice system, in terms of minimal sentencing, in terms of local police departments which look like armies that are invading a community. But to answer your question, I think what we have got to do is when we see instances of racism, when we hear political leaders appealing to the worst elements of us by making racist attacks against people from another country or people whose color may be different than most of us, we have got to stand up and say, in America, you're not going to do that. Racism is unacceptable. Well, let me just say this. The answer is, obviously, we have got to change our hearts.
Yes.
But everybody here should know, 50, 60, 70 years ago in this country,
Yes.
we had segregated schools and segregated restaurants. And it took a Supreme Court, it took Martin Luther King Jr., it took millions of people to man public policy which ended segregation.
That's right. Well, we know that you were in North Carolina last night. You're going to be in Manassas this afternoon. You continue to go from place to place, just meeting your staff. They're just incredibly hardworking people in this very fast pace where you and your wife are on the campaign trail with grandkids, and you're the liveliest 73-year-old I've ever met, sir. And how can we pray for you and your family? How can we be thinking of you? What can we, when we think of you and we see you on TV, what can we say? Bernie Sanders asked us to pray for him. He asked us to, what can we?
Well, David, thank you very much for that thought. I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. But this is what I would like prayers to be for.
Yes, sir.
not just for me, far more significantly, are prayers for our country, prayers for how we bring our people together, prayers for how we can create in the wealthiest country in the history of the world a beautiful country, a country where all people have health care, where all kids who have the ability can go to college, where we have wiped out childhood poverty. Those are the prayers that I want to join with you in making. I think my message to you all today is a pretty simple one, and that is our country faces some enormous problems, and these problems are not going to be solved if people turn away from political struggle, if people throw up their hands in despair and say, I don't want to get involved, it's all crap. You are getting a great education here in Georgetown. And I hope very much you will use what you have learned here to fight to create a better world and to follow in the traditions of so many people for so many years who have struggled to create a more democratic and just society. Let me take you now back to the 1937. And in his inaugural address, in the midst of the Great Depression, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt looked out at the nation in the midst of this terrible depression. And this is what he saw, and this is what he talked about in his inaugural. He saw tens of millions of people denied the basic necessities of life. He saw millions of families trying to live on incomes so meager that the pall of family disaster hung over them every single day. He saw millions of his fellow Americans denied education, recreation, and the opportunity to better their lot and the lot of their children. He saw millions lacking the means to buy the products they needed, and by their poverty, by their lack of disposable income, denying employment to many other millions. Because when you don't have money to spend, you're not creating jobs for other people. He saw 1/3 of a nation ill-housed, ill-clad, and ill-nourished. And he acted against the ferocious opposition of the ruling class of his day, people he called the economic royalists. Roosevelt implemented a series of programs that put millions of Americans back to work, took them out of dire poverty, and restored their faith in government. He redefined the relationship of the federal government to the people of our nation. He combated cynicism, fear, and despair. He reinvigorated democracy. He transformed our country, and that is exactly what we have to do today. And by the way, almost everything he proposed, almost every program, every idea he introduced was called socialist. I thought I would mention that just in passing. Social Security, which all of you know transformed life for senior citizens in this country, was defined by his opponents as socialist. The concept of the minimum wage that workers had to be paid at least a certain amount of money for their labor was seen as a radical intrusion into the marketplace and was described as socialist. Unemployment insurance, when you lose your job, you have something to fall back upon. Abolishing child labor, ending the fact that children of 8, 10, 12 years of age were working in factories or working in the fields. The 40-hour work week, collective bargaining, the rights of workers to engage in negotiations with a union, strong banking regulations, deposit insurance, and job programs that put millions of people to work were all described in one way or another as socialist. Yet, as you all know, all of these programs and many more have become the fabric of our nation and, in fact, the foundation of our middle class. 30 years later, after Roosevelt's speech in the 1960s, President Lyndon Johnson fought for Medicare and Medicaid to provide health care to millions of senior citizens and families with children, persons with disabilities, and some of the most vulnerable people in this country. Today, Medicare does not seem to be such a terribly radical idea to say that when somebody gets old, they should have medical insurance, but when it was proposed, once again, we heard right-wing forces describe these programs as socialistic and a threat to the American way of life. That was then, now is now. Today, in the year 2015, despite the Wall Street crash of 2008, which drove this country into the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression, the American people are clearly better off economically than they were in 1937. But here is a very hard truth that we must acknowledge, we must address, we must not sweep under the rug. And that is, despite a huge increase in technology, and I can remember back, I was mayor of the city of Burlington, Vermont. Anybody here from Vermont? Okay. And when I was mayor in the 1980s, a radical development took place. We got computers in City Hall. Okay? 1980s. Despite a huge increase in technology and worker productivity, meaning that almost every worker in America with that technology is producing a lot more than workers that came before. Despite major growth in our GDP and a huge increase in the global economy, tens of millions of American families continue today to lack the basic necessities of life, while millions more struggle every day to provide a minimal standard of living for their families. And I hope none of you will turn your back on that reality. And the truth is, and again, this is a truth we must put on the table. Yes, we are better off today economically than we were 7 years ago when Bush left office. But the other truth is that for the last 40 years under Republican leadership and Democratic leadership, the great middle class of our country has been in decline, and faith in our political system is now extremely low. New technology, increased worker productivity, people working longer hours for lower wages, faith in our political system now extremely low. In my state of Vermont and all over this country, it is absolutely not uncommon to see people working 2 jobs or 3 jobs to cobble together the income and the health care they and their families need. In fact, Americans work longer hours than do the people of any other industrialized country. But despite the fact that our people are working so hard, I go around the country and I see a lot of working people, and you can see the stress and exhaustion on their faces. They're working crazy hours. Husbands hardly see wives. People don't have the quality time for their kids because they're working so hard just to bring in the income to survive. And despite all of that, despite our people working so hard, 58% of all new income generated today is going to the top 1%. Today in America, as the middle class continues to disappear, median family income is $4,100 less than it was in 1999. The median male worker made over $700 less than he did 42 years ago in inflation adjusted for dollars. Do you know why people are angry? They are angry because they are working terribly hard, and yet in real inflation adjusted for dollars, they are earning less. And they're looking all over and they say, what's happening? Why is that? But it's not just men. Last year, the median female worker earned more than $1,000 less than she did in 2007, and 58% of all new income goes to the top 1%. Today in America, the wealthiest country in the history of the world, that's what we are today, more than half of older workers have 0 retirement savings. Think about that. You're 50, 55 years of age, and you're thinking, all right, how am I going to retire? But because my wages have gone down, I have 0 in the bank for retirement. And at the same time, all over America, you got millions of seniors and people with disabilities trying to survive on $12,000 or $13,000 a year Social Security. From Vermont to California, older workers are scared to death, and they are saying, how am I going to retire with dignity? And I want all of you can get your calculators out, not now, when you leave here. Do some arithmetic and try to put yourself in the place of a senior citizen in my state of Vermont, where it gets cold in the winter, trying to survive on $13,000 a year. And you tell me how you are going to pay for the food that you need, heat your home, and buy the medicine that you need. And you know what? You can't do it. Today in America, nearly 47 million people are living in poverty, and over 20% of our children, including 36% of African American kids, are living in poverty, the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any nation on earth. And what I want you to think about is, why is it in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, where we're seeing a proliferation of millionaires and billionaires, we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth? Today in America, 29 million Americans have no health insurance, and even more are underinsured with outrageously high co-payments and deductibles. In other words, people do have insurance, but I talk to people every day. They got a $5,000 deductible, $8,000 deductible. They can't go to the doctor when they need. And then on top of that, for a wide variety of reasons, our people pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. And doctors tell me all of the time, we prescribe something, a medicine for our patients, they can't afford to fill that medicine, that prescription. 1 out of 5 Americans cannot afford to fill the prescriptions their doctors write. What insanity is that? Today in America, youth unemployment and underemployment is over 35%. For African American kids, it is over 50%. Meanwhile, we have more people in jail than any other country. China, communist authoritarian country, 4 times our size, we have more people in jail than China, and countless lives are being destroyed as we spend $80 billion a year locking up our fellow Americans. The bottom line is that today in America, we not only have massive wealth and income inequality, but a power structure built around that inequality, which protects those who have the money. Today, a handful of super wealthy campaign contributors have enormous influence over the political process, while their lobbyists determine much of what goes on in Congress. And any member of the United States House or Senate who is prepared to tell you the truth will tell you exactly that. So let me take this opportunity to define for you, simply and straightforwardly, what democratic socialism means to me. It means building on what Franklin Delano Roosevelt said when he fought for guaranteed economic rights for all Americans. And it builds on what Martin Luther King Jr. said in 1968 when he stated, and I quote, "This country has socialism for the rich and rugged individualism for the poor," end of quote. We as a people have to lay this issue right on the table, and that is that people in American jails are disproportionately, to a very significant degree, people of color. And that is the reality in America today, and that is a reality that has to change. Too many lives, too many lives are being destroyed, and together we are going to bring about major reforms of a broken criminal justice system. 13% of African American men have lost the right to vote due to felony convictions. And this, by the way, is an issue we don't talk about very much, but it is of huge political consequence. 13% of African American men have lost their right to vote. Criminal justice reform must be the civil rights issue of the 21st century, and the first piece that we must address is police reform. The killings of unarmed African Americans has got to stop. Across our nation, too many African Americans and other minorities find themselves subjected to a system that treats citizens who have not committed crimes as if they were criminals. A growing number of communities do not trust the police, and police have become disconnected, alien to the communities that they are sworn to protect. At the federal level, we need to establish a new model police training program that reorients the way we do law enforcement in this country. With input from a broad segment of the community, we must reinvent how we police America. A critically important component of this reform is a set of new rules on the allowable use of force. Lethal force must be the last resort, not the first resort. Police officers need to be trained to de-escalate confrontations and to humanely interact with people who have mental illnesses. There are neighborhoods in this country, and you all know this, where mothers, it's hard to believe in America, but it's true, where mothers are afraid to let their children outside, go outside, for fear of gang violence and drugs, and we owe it to those mothers to get dangerous people off the streets. But mothers should not be afraid of their children being targeted by the police because of the color of their skin. And they should not be worried that a routine interaction with law enforcement ends in inappropriate force or even death. We do not want any mother in America to have to worry about that. But of course, criminal justice reform goes well beyond reforming police departments. We have to rethink our entire approach. We cannot jail our way out of health problems like drug addiction or social and economic problems like poverty. We must end the over-incarceration of nonviolent young Americans who do not pose a serious threat to our society. It is unacceptable to me that we stigmatize so many young Americans with a criminal record for possessing marijuana, but at the same time, not one major CEO of a Wall Street bank whose illegal activities helped destroy the economy of the United States, not one of them has a police record. It appears that we have a criminal justice system which says that not only is a bank too big to fail, but bankers are too big to jail. And by the way, all of that, the fact that hundreds and hundreds of lives of young people have been destroyed because they get police records for smoking marijuana, and the fact that no CEOs of Wall Street firms get police records, all of this has a huge impact upon people's attitude toward the government, upon justice, upon fairness. The federal system of parole needs to be reinstated. For people who are serving long sentences, there needs to be an incentive for people to make different choices and earn their way to a shorter sentence and a path to a productive life. For people who have committed crimes that have landed them in jail, there needs to be a path back from prison. And that includes a restoration of full voting rights. Now, I don't have to tell you that by and large, we do a pretty bad job in making sure that when people are released from jail, they don't end up in jail again. Clearly, you don't have to be a criminologist to understand that if somebody leaves jail without job training, without education, without money, without housing, the odds are that they will fall back into the same environment that got them in jail in the first place. And that is a waste of human life, and that is a huge waste of taxpayers' dollars, and we have got to end that. We must address the lingering, unjust stereotypes that lead us to label black youths as thugs or super predators. If we are serious about keeping kids out of jail, if we are serious about making sure our kids are in school or have jobs, yes, we can do that. We do not need to allow millions of kids to fall through the cracks, to hang out on street corners, to get into trouble, to end up in jail, and to see their lives destroyed. Every child in America, whether in my hometown of Burlington, Vermont, or here in Columbia, South Carolina, if you do your schoolwork well, if you pay attention, if you are serious about school, you will be able to go to college regardless of the income of your family. We have to make sure that poor communities have access to credit on fair terms, not payday lenders. You know, the pathetic truth is, it is very expensive to be poor. Do you know what I mean by that? All right. You cash your check and you pay an outrageous sum of money because you're not able to get a bank account in a normal bank. We got to change those things.
With the growing Islamophobia in this country, if you look at all the Republican candidates, in order to feed into their constituents, they're talking about Islamophobia and are constantly bashing Muslims in the media. Ben Carson, Donald Trump, the biggest bigots. As a Muslim student, as an American Muslim student who aspires to change this world, Thank you. As an American Muslim student who aspires to change the world, currently majoring in international conflict analysis and resolution major, and I hope to be a human rights attorney. Hearing the rhetoric that's going on in the media makes me sick. Because I, as an individual, I'm constantly trying to raise awareness and make sure that everyone is treated equally in this country. So, to the next president of the United States, what do you think about that?
This is what I think. This is what I think. Let me be very personal here, if I might. I'm Jewish. My father's family died in concentration camps. I will do everything that I can to rid this country of the ugly stain of racism which has existed for far too many years. And let me tell you something. What racism is about is many, many things. It is pent-up hatred that is lashing out at people in uncontrollable and stupid ways, but it is something very different than that. For many years in this country, you have had politicians, and I'm old enough to know this, who played black off against white. So they told white workers who are earning pennies an hour, they said, hey, you think you're in trouble, but you're better off than the blacks who can't drink at a water fountain or go to your school. And they told straight people, well, you think you got problems, but you're better off than those gay people, right? And they told men against women. We played one group off against another. The rich got richer, everybody else is fighting with each other. Our job is to build a nation in which we all stand together as one people. And you are right. There is a lot of anger being generated, hatred being generated against Muslims in this country. That's absolutely correct. There is hatred being generated against immigrants in this country. And if we stand for anything, we have got to stand together and end all forms of racism, and I will lead that effort as President of the United States.
I'm supporting Bernie Sanders because he says no to fracking. I'm supporting Bernie Sanders because we do need a single-payer health care system that takes care of everyone, and that is not a pipe dream. That's something that's happening all over the world in really positive ways. We are a social democracy. That's our firefighters, that's our policemen, and it shouldn't be drawn a line. That's, a fireman will go into your house to take your hard drive out and save your cat, but if you break your leg, screw you. That doesn't make any sense. When you actually go and you travel around the world and you start recognizing that people can actually be sick, they can have a broken leg and not lose their job and lose their livelihoods and lose their homes over it. That's really important. Free college, universities, that's a really, really big deal. People shouldn't be thinking about that for the rest of their life. They're going to be having these deals, because I'm looking at people who are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s who are still paying off their student loans. That's crazy. How are we supposed to compete in the economy as it's moving forward? The world, we're being replaced by robots. We're not going to be globally competitive if we're not making sure people are getting the education that they need.
What about the TV networks that say that Bernie Sanders can't get the support of communities of color?
Well, that's obviously ridiculous, and that's obvious. But again, you got to really look at the fact that these companies and their parent companies are the ones who have, they're dependent on fossil fuel and pharmaceutical companies putting the commercials around them. They're dependent on, all of, this is about people making money and lobbyists. This is not about us. Let's try to get Bernie on. And the more opportunity he has to talk to the people and not get the facts obfuscated or misconstrued by the mass media that has been happening. The times that I watch him on these other shows and then watch them right after and start rolling their eyes like, well, did you hear? I'm like, no, that's not what he said. And because people are busy, they're taking advantage of the fact, this is something I understand because I'm an actor. So we're constantly trying to put out, this new movie's coming out, this new thing, whatever is coming out, will you come and watch it? And we're trying to razzle-dazzle you to pay attention in the midst of your busy lives. What's happening with the corporate media is they're abusing the fact that they know that you're busy with your lives, and so they're hoping that you miss the debate and that you miss all this stuff so that their summary is what you walk away with. And it's wrong. And it's yellow journalism, and you're misleading people, and you're going to have that on your hands. The Iraq war that they sold you, that's blood on your hands. This is the reality. You cannot be selling us someone who voted yes on it and take no responsibility. That is not okay. And so that's why I'm here and trying to do what I can, because it's not about making anyone feel better. It's like Louis Guzman was saying, if you just took away their brand names and you took away their faces and just listen to what they had to say, who would you vote for? It's very clear that is Bernie Sanders. It's very clear. So that's what we have to do, is keep giving people that information, because when I say people are voting against themselves, it's because I'm telling you, you are. Because I'm actually looking at this information and I'm watching people do it. So if you have real substantive reasons why you want to support your candidate, then great, bring that to the table. But that's not what I've been hearing. And people are starting to wake up to what our election process looks like. We are not a democracy, even though we keep trying to push that colonially all around the world. What we are is a republic. And so if we want it to be a democracy, we need to hire someone for the job who's going to actually want to make that happen, so that we can have the voter day, the election day be a holiday, so that we can have mandatory and automatic voter registration, so that we can maybe start being about an electoral college. That's great. But right now, the powers that be, the establishment politicians in politics, they don't want that to happen. I can tell you, I've done voter registration for over 11 years. I have to say, the one thing I've noticed is, the millionaires and the billionaires that we sat down with, they didn't want to give us money for voter registration or any of the other places. They want to give you money for the candidates. And they just want to give you money for the get out the vote. They want to know that the few amount of people that are voting, that they can persuade one way or the other. Right. They don't want all you new young voters, because they don't know, that's too risky. They don't know what you're going to do. And you disrupt the system.
In these primaries, more than 80% of the people are not voting.
Yeah. And it's crazy, and what we're seeing, record numbers of voter registration also happening. And part of it's responsible people wanting to vote against Trump, and a lot of it's responsible because people want to get their chance to vote for the first time for Bernie Sanders.
Who do you think would beat Donald Trump?
It's not a question. This again, even that kind of question, already across the polls, Bernie beats him by a landslide. So again, it's a red herring. It's a false narrative to think that the only way to beat Trump is to somehow vote for the other Democratic candidate. That's not true. And now we're not in the general election. He doesn't have the nomination yet. So stop jumping us into the future. Right now we're in our present, and we get to vote for someone who has values that we believe in and who supports us in the way that he needs us to support him. And that's actually a really beautiful thing. Millions of people marched against the Iraq war before it happened. That's historical. Millions of people marched against the bailout. Millions of people, students, walked out in 2006 against immigration reform. They texted each other and walked out of their high school classrooms. Like, we keep seeing these mass movements of people going, this is not the way things should be done, and it gets ignored. The thousands of people who've been marching across America for Bernie that doesn't get any press coverage. Because Gil Scott-Heron said the revolution will not be televised. But it's time for it to be televised, and thank you so much for televising it, because we need people to know how beautiful this moment is. No matter what, look at this. This is incredible. And we have a Jewish man who's talking about Palestine. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is a really, really remarkable, huge moment, and we cannot gloss it over. You're doing a disservice to people by doing so. This is something really beautiful. I'm doing this because love trumps hate. Not because I need to vote against somebody, but because love trumps hate. This is a love movement. I'm so excited.
All across this country, there is a significant alienation from the political process. People look to Washington and they throw their hands up and they say, what in God's name is going on there? Why aren't our senators and our congressmen paying attention to our needs? Why aren't we developing a rational foreign policy rather than talking again about getting involved in a quagmire in the Middle East, which could lead to perpetual warfare? So let me conclude just by saying this. The problems that we face as a nation are indeed very, very serious. I've talked on some. There's a lot we haven't even touched upon. But by and large, all of these problems were caused by bad human decisions. And if we come together, if we stand together, if we do not allow ourselves to be divided up by race, by whether we're gay or whether we're straight, whether we're born in America, we weren't born in America, whether we're a male or a female, if we stand together and if we focus on how we can create sane foreign policy, how we can rebuild the middle class, how we can combat climate change, how we can create a nation in which we end racism and homophobia. If we are prepared to do that, if you, as young people, are prepared to engage in the political process, I have no doubt that there is nothing that together we cannot accomplish. Thank you all very much.